Following the success of its previous games, the 2018 God of War is the 8th installment of the series. Developed by Santa Monica Studio and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, God of War is a different game than its predecessor. Unlike the previous games that take inspirations and base the story on Greek mythology, God of War 2018 has a different setting and is influenced by Norse mythology. According to the director of the game, Cory Barlog, God of War is the reimagining and reinvention of the franchise. Utilizing free camera movement in contrast to the fixed camera shot that the previous games have adopted, role-playing aspect is also introduced in this entry. While Kratos remains as the playable character, the players are also offered to call for his son's assistance in combat, adding agency to his character alongside Kratos. Here, we follow the same protagonist with his backstory turned around and placed under a different spotlight for people to experience, leaving his vengeance behind and making Kratos less angry in his narrative of what it means to be a god, intertwined with a story about a father and his son. With over 19 million sales by the end of 2021 and over 23 million sales by the end of 2022, God of War had a big jump of sales record with only a year apart. It is one of the fastest-selling PS4 game exclusives alongside other notable titles such as Horizon Zero Dawn, Uncharted 4, and The Last of Us 2. Sold over 3.1 million of copies on its first 3 days of release, it is one of the most beloved franchises and reboots, with fans around the world supporting the game and following Kratos on his adventure. In that regard, the purpose of this essay is to examine and analyze the mass attraction towards God of War and its success through the lens of player psychology as well as game design by discussing and applying various theories on behavior and motivations in games such as wish fulfillment and embodiment of the characters in the narrative, attraction in violence and actions, semiotics, colors, and environmental psychology. The first contributing aspect to the success of this game is the story and character. Straying from its previous series, God of War 2018 met and exceeded the player's expectation with the unfamiliarity of its reinvention and character's rewriting. Unlike the predecessors, God of War follows not only Kratos but also his son Atreus. Takes place after the death of Kratos' wife, Atreus' mother, Faye. Both of them go on a journey to fulfill her wish of spreading her ashes on the highest peak in all 9 realms. Throughout this journey, the players get to experience Kratos and Atreus' growth as they learn to know and understand each other better. The attempt to humanize Kratos from someone who is filled with anger and vengeance to someone who is now older and is struggling to connect with his son is a direction that Cory Barlog took in an attempt to challenge people's perception of who they thought Kratos is. Parts of it were a reflection of his own relationship with his son and his own experience in navigating parenthood. Taking on honest and intimate themes like parenthood and grief amidst an overarching adventure across the 9 realms, God of War adds relatability towards the characters. It offers the players a chance to empathize and sympathize with the game, allowing them to experience both an epic action adventure with larger-than-life elements that have smaller and more personal themes inside of it. Because of those perspectives offered in the game, it touches the wish fulfillment theory and the embodiment theory that grant the player a space to reflect on their own experience and see it through a different light. So, what is the wish fulfillment theory and the embodiment theory? It is an existing psychodynamic theory that stems from Freud, Jung, and Lacan. Psychodynamic theories have been used to analyze cinema for longer than games, as the latter is considered as something newer or more modern, even though nowadays there are a lot of overlap between the study of film and game. Wish fulfillment and embodiment acknowledges attraction. It is our desire that seeks to be achieved, our wantings and longings that sometimes are impossible to fulfill in real life. Thus, why we seek to fulfill those wishes through the media we interact with. It is why we go to see certain films, fall in love with certain types of characters, and project ourselves into those media and characters. Certain parts of us yearn to be fulfilled, which makes us gravitate towards the characters we relate, personalities we can embody, and media we connect. Digital media offers us a chance to uniquely explore the human forms of embodiment that allows an engaging and immersive gameplay. Thus, the successful application of these elements in God of War 2018 has contributed to its popularity. More focus on narrative and character development doesn't mean the game is straying from its action, bloodshed, and violent nature. As Kratos grapples with grief, godhood, and fatherhood throughout their journey to Jotunheim, the players are still provided with violent action scenes and bloodshed throughout the gameplay. Naturally, attraction towards violence is a quality that humans have always possessed. In his book, The Myth of Media Violence, David Trent said, "The ubiquity of violent imagery in everyday life makes it a topic about which everyone has an opinion. Yet, the fractured and contradictory character of the public debate on media violence offers little insight. Instead, the discussion degenerates into arguments between those who fear and those who relish such material." However, I think despite how some of us would shy away from it, we need to acknowledge that as a species, humans have been both the spectators and perpetrators of violence for centuries. Throughout history, mankind has always been riddled with morbid curiosity and interest towards it. Colosseum was built, torture devices were invented, public crucifixion was held, and human sacrifices were made. In relation to God of War and its inspiration of Greek and Norse mythology, an example of this can be seen in Greek tragedies and their epics, how the Trojan War unfolded in the Iliad, revenge in the Bacchae, as well as their view towards money, festival, and sacrifices as a way to maintain a city, as written in Plato's The Republic. Excessive violent acts can also be found throughout Norse mythology as seen in Prose Edda and its strikingly violent narrative. Thus, the attraction to brutality has always been prevalent in our history, which trickles down to the modern era on-screen violence that we love to engage in. God of War is another one of the cinematic violence, which can be seen in how the protagonist navigates the world and interacts with his enemy as well as his environment, slashing and crushing the enemies, punching open chests, and stomping on healthstone. Even an act that is meant to raise his health is also depicted in rather a violent motion. Attraction towards violence is what motivates us to choose this form of media as a way to fulfill our wish. The desire to interact with on-screen violence needs to be acknowledged, as it doesn't equal enjoyment but rather draws from various different human frameworks such as social, biological, and psychological. What used to be done in public and in the real world can no longer be done, so instead of completely denying ourselves, we remove those acts towards on-screen media. This offers a cathartic release from pent-up frustration through imaginary participation in violent media. The violent nature of the game provides the players with a release and cathartic feel, which is hard to achieve in the real world. Not only does it provide a cathartic effect, Kratos' display of violence also provides context of what kind of character he is, adding nuance and story in its deliberate implementation of violence. Therefore, this is another aspect of what draws people towards God of War and contributes to its success. Building on the previously mentioned elements that support the narrative structure of the game, semiology is also tied to God of War and its success. Specified as the study of meaning-making and symbolism, semiotics is important in the creation of games and activity of play. In order to convey meaning and communicate messages to the players, signs and symbols are often used instead of verbal or written language. These visual cues are complex and influenced by cultures and subcultures, which can be tricky to apply since subjectivity, pre-existing knowledge, and a degree of familiarity is expected from both the designer and the player. It is a social convention and rules that connect objects and signs. In game design, these symbols can either be overtly displayed and need little to no interpretation, or covertly displayed, which means they do require a degree of understanding and certain knowledge. God of War is no exception to semiology, in which the game is richly imbued with meanings. One of them is how the characters are designed. Kratos, the God of War himself, is big, bald, and bulky. Quiet and intimidating, he wields the Blade of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe as he slays god and monsters alike. Masculine and sturdy, he is built in rectangular shapes with sharp edges of his weapons. Angular shapes are generally associated with threats and anger as well as negative emotions. This, combined with his asymmetrical design created from his red tattoos and chest armor, construct a rather violent-looking character that does not look like a mere mortal. In addition to that, the Omega symbol that accompanies his design and scene used as his axe holder is applied as a nod to his past in Greece and his role as the god of war. There are a lot of implementations of the symbol in various fields, such as physics, astronomy, religion, chemistry, computer science, and more. It originated from the Greek alphabet and is the last one in its 24 sequences. As the last letter of Greek alphabet, it generally symbolizes an end or a limit to something. It is used in many fields, and each representation means something different based on the context it adopts. However, it usually orbits similar theme around destruction, rebirth, and the end of something. In the interpretation of symbols, subjectivity should always be taken into account. Connection between society structure, process, and symbolic structures are important. The dominant, negotiated, and oppositional reading should always be considered, as each person takes symbolism differently. Dominant reading is the preferred way of reading. Through the lens of game design, it is the way in which the designer wants the game to be interpreted by the player. Negotiated reading is the additional meaning that comes with the symbol. The designer might not mean for the symbol to be interpreted in this way, but is aware of its possibility. And lastly, oppositional reading is something that is unintentional, and sometimes the designer might not be aware of its double meaning. Generally, they do not mean for the readings to be interpreted in this opposite way. With that in mind, the symbol in Kratos could also be interpreted in multiple different things. One of the many interpretations could be a thread that links the destruction of gods and Kratos as a character. How his revenge brought bloodshed and end of Greece, as well as how much hatred he harbors. This understanding of the Omega symbol requires some knowledge about Greek mythology to a certain extent, which ties to how semiology is intertwined with myths and cultures. In contrast to Kratos' design, Atreus is rounder and softer, a leaner build of someone who wields a bow. Non-angular and rounded shapes are generally seen as non-threatening, friendly, and trustworthy. This acts as a reflection of his personality as a character who is optimistic and has a more positive outlook towards the world. His design symmetry, shown in how he is posed, and the X shape that his straps are making on his chest, creates a more balanced feel. Symmetry is generally favored by the human brain as it represents order and harmony, as opposed to asymmetry that represents more chaotic nature, which matches this father and son's dynamic.
Come on! Do it! Do it!
Stop. Please.
He's beaten father. Not a threat.
Although contrasting one another, the use of red color in both characters, Kratos with his tattoo and Atreus with his arrow, creates a cohesive look that implies a connection between them. With this, it is shown how color theory and psychology are tied to semiotics. Colors are used to add meanings and evoke feelings. In a way, it is a subjective visual language that is enforced in video games. There are many ways to ingrain meanings into a game, visual cues like signs and symbols, as well as the infusion of myths or pre-existing lore into the story. The subjectivity of semiotics and its application in God of War could lead the players to create new meanings that suit their own interpretation, but also help them to further their understanding. God of War does not require the players to be familiar with Greek and Norse mythology. However, it will certainly help to immerse and support the play experience if the players have some degree of understanding and knowledge of them. Thus, the successful combination of all elements and semiotics in God of War contributes to its mass attraction. In addition to those supporting factors, environmental psychology is also responsible towards the popularity of God of War 2018. Environmental psychology is the practice of understanding how humans interact with their environment. It is a complex area which focuses on the relationship between individuals and their surroundings. This relates to how spaces can be utilized effectively and how environment can be built through the lens of human design. It is a large interdisciplinary field that consists of various branches and studies, which includes virtual and games environment. Virtual environment mimics its real-world counterpart and ideation in its effect on the players and their psychology. How the player takes the information depends on their own subjectivity and bias. However, with the nature of the game and its genre of adventure and RPG, a lot of the main environments where the characters interact with are usually wide open spaces, which conveys freedom and adventure that the genre convention offers. Set in Scandinavia and based on Norse mythology, the 9 realms in God of War are depicted to have contrasting environment design that communicates different things. These add depth and offer the player something new every time the characters travel. For example, Helheim, cold, windy, and icy. The use of green colors help to exaggerate the freezing cold in Helheim in its visual depiction. Muspelheim, volcanoes, fire, and ashes. Bright red to contrast the dark volcanic rocks, much warmer tones compared to Helheim. The realm travel room, purple and blue lights, grand and symmetrical in its design. Jotunheim, dry sand and gigantic structures that got eaten away by time. Alfheim, bright and airy nature that exists alongside the structure. Just like semiology that is intertwined with colors, so is environmental psychology. Designing a player-centric virtual space, game designers work with colors as it is the primary language utilized in-game. As the players explore the game world, they expect to meet challenges and complete certain tasks while navigating its terrain. So the balance of having these environments visually aesthetic while also functional and purposeful has to be achieved. God of War adds noticeable architectures as the landmarks and yellow paints for climbable terrain for visual aids, or the use of lighting to indicate which way to go, as well as some navigational tools like a map and compass integrated in the game world. This combination and balance found in God of War 2018 helps the players to explore the world without losing their immersion and autonomy over wayfinding decisions, making the game feel more satisfying. In the end, God of War 2018's success is a combination of all different things. The game owes it to its story and character writing, which created alongside its implementation of violence and action, semiotics and color, as well as their environmental design and the effect of the player's psychology. With all of these contributing factors, God of War managed to build an immersive world and engaging narrative that is both a grand adventure as well as an intimate and personal one. I like the idea that there was a lot more to Kratos than any of us knew. In order to get that change to ring true, especially with a character as quiet as Kratos, you need an external force. That's where Atreus came in. So, at its core, God of War is a tale that takes on the theme of family from various different perspectives, told in a both epic and personal way that speaks to its player and allows the game to reach the success.
Goodbye, Finn.
I love you, Mom.
If you're still here, I just wanted to say I can't believe you've made it this far, and thank you so much for watching. God of War is one of my favorite games ever, and it was such a memorable and life-changing experience to play. This video was originally an essay that I did for one of my game study class in uni, which I thought would be interesting and fun to turn into a video format. So once again, thank you so much for watching and listening to me. See you maybe in the next video.